So in my video on the AMX-30 Acura, I talked about how the 2AV in War Thunder is not very accurate. At least this specific model. The version that Gaijin added is called the PT-19. So now that I have a test drive for it, I thought I could play it and talk about some of the inaccuracies that it has, the history behind it, and how it can be made more accurate while still being good. And honestly, I think it'd be more unique if it was changed. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into it. So the model that Gaijin added is called PT-19, and the PT-19 was the model that Germany sent over to the US for comparison with the XM1. But apparently due to time and budgetary constraints, they didn't put armor in it. There was no composite. But as far as the US Army knew, the PT-19 had armor in it. They didn't find out until after mobility trials, when they were like, wow, this thing is really fast. And someone went up and knocked on it, and they heard a hollow sound. And they were going to, I believe, ultrasound or x-ray. However they measure armor, I don't remember exactly how it's done. But before they did that, they asked the German representative and said, hey, what's up with this? And he said, yeah, there's no armor in it. I'll write you a memo that you can present to Congress. This was a pretty major factor in the XM1 being chosen. People like to act like the XM1 program was a bailout for Chrysler in general, but that wasn't really the case. I talked about why the Chrysler was better than the GM model in my Abrams Myths video. The US was kind of burned by the whole ordeal, but not only that, when they did test the ballistic hull and turret, they figured out that while the 2AV had slightly better kinetic protection, it would have had overall worse chemical. And that was, you know, the main threat they were worried about, because most of the things you're going to be encountering are going to be, you know, RPGs, ATGMs, stuff like that, not kinetic rounds. But also it would have been more expensive to produce. In some areas it was better than the XM1, in some areas it was worse. The 2AV having armor isn't the only issue that it has. The 2AV, you might have noticed, has armor that is basically on par with the 2A4, which is not accurate at all. The 2A4 uses an improved armor package called C-Tech Armor, at least it does in War Thunder, and that was developed in the mid-1980s, I believe. So that's well above what the 2AV should have. The 2AV should have like 350 against KE, and I believe it's 600 to 700 versus chemical. I'd have to look at a document again, I'll show it on the screen. It also gets DM33 for the cannon, which is not correct. So instead of making what could have been a pretty unique vehicle, they basically just made a 2A4 with a 105. To be clear, I'm not saying the PT-19 should have all of its armor removed. What I think should happen is it should just be called a generic 2AV, and it should have composite armor, but not the C-Tech armor the 2A4 has. And I don't get why Gaijin is so choosy. Like with the T-25, it was basically an amalgamation of two pilot models, and they removed the stabilizer because the model looked more like the pilot that didn't have a stabilizer than the one that did, and even I don't really agree with that. But with this, they're perfectly fine naming it a very specific model of 2AV, and then giving it things that it didn't have. I would say though, for people that point out like, hey, the M6A2 got a front plate that it didn't have, you know, Russian tanks get things that they never had, I would say yeah, and I don't agree with that. And I guess for people that ask, you know, why do you care so much about historical accuracy, people take this game at face value too much. Like, they use it to base their opinions far too often. So I could see people thinking that the 2AV had armor that was on par with the 2A4, or that the PT-19 had armor like this. Like, most people aren't going to really do that much research, you know? And for people wondering, no, I don't genuinely want my historically accurate series to, like, be implemented in the game. I don't want that level of realism. You know, that series was never about genuine gameplay suggestions. Unless it's like a very minor thing, like, oh, this vehicle should have 1 extra degree of gun depression, or whatever. Like, I perfectly understand that there has to be a balance between gameplay and realism, but I feel like most of the time you can have your cake and eat it too. It's just that Gaijin really wants certain vehicles to fill out certain BR brackets. Because they're looking at it from a lineup perspective and not a per vehicle perspective, you know? They're thinking, oh, like 9.7 Germany looks pretty weak, even though it isn't at all. Yeah, let's add the 2AV there and give it, you know, 2A4 level armor. There were also some claims that the PT-19 was made out of milled steel, which in War Thunder would be structural steel. So it would be like 0.45 of what RHA would be. I've only seen one place claim that, and it was some Facebook page. It might have been for a museum, I don't know. But that wouldn't stand up to Gaijin's bug report scrutiny, and I don't agree that that's really enough to make a solid decision on it. So I think it having RHA is fine. I will say, though, that German teams at 9.7 are pretty awful right now. Most of the games I've played so far in this, the team is just disintegrated instantly. I'm sure it doesn't help that I haven't played War Thunder in like 4 days. From what I can gather, the event rewards are just generally not very good. The 2AV, so far playing it, is you might as well just play a 2A4. You have a tank that's good but not very unique. You have a jet that's unique but awful. You've got a Hungarian tank, which is actually unique, but I don't think is working very properly right now. So yeah, probably just get the low tier reward, but don't even bother with anything else. That did not work. That got him. I am shocked that killed him. I hope this was somewhat informative, and I might try to make more hybrid videos like this in the future where I play a vehicle while talking about its history and all that. But if you guys have suggestions for vehicles you want me to play, leave them in the comments. As always, hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.